Wendigoon is a YouTuber with over 3 million subscribers on the site who talks about a variety of mature subject matter like iceberg videos on dark material or conspiracy theories throughout his time. Some people have recently been trying to go after the man, with an ever-growing faction continuing to try and tear him down for what seems to be no reason at all. So, I decided to see what the reason is behind the hatred for the man and see what exactly is going on here. Shout out to the channel members like always, and if you'd want to support yourself, you can subscribe to my Patreon in the corner or YouTube memberships by clicking the join button. I hope you liked the video. Now let's get right into everything and answer the simple question: why do people hate Wendigoon so much? The very first thing that people had issues with Wendigoon was back in fall 2021 when infamous internet lolcow Chris Chan was arrested after having sex with his mother and raping her. Chris is said to be transgender, but it's heavily doubted upon as evidence points he transitioned to try and open up his dating pool as he had been dealing with failed dates for well over a decade up to that point. Wendigoon was a big figure who was openly critical about Chris Chan online after the arrest happened, making this post about how he mutilated his body with a box cutter due to 4chan's meddling and mentioning him transitioning into becoming a woman to open up his dating pool as we just discussed. Some people see this as him being transphobic to Chris Chan, but those that are defending Chris really don't know just how deep the rabbit hole goes with that dude, with people even on Reddit pointing out just how bad of a person Chris is. This would become a heated debate online as some few people believe you must refer to Chris Chan as a woman, while the vast majority make the exception in this case for him being an awful human who raped his own mother. There are even trans people who are saying as such and pointing out just how much of a piece of shit Chris Chan is in the stuff he's done in his life, meaning this situation was a lot more decisive than most when it comes to this kind of identity politics debates on the internet. This isn't a situation where someone is being transphobic and bullying another person for their identity. This is somebody talking about a garbage human being who raped his own mother due to his failure in life to get a proper girlfriend or wife, and the vast majority of people move on from this as Wendigoon just being a little extra spicy than usual at worst, with a very few minorities still trying to say he's transphobic to this very day. Next would be when some people try to go after him because he calls himself Wendigoon, a reference to the Wendigo, a folklore creature popular in Native American storytelling due to being cool as fuck. However, some few people online would accuse him of cultural appropriation and would go after him for this despite him being partially Native American, adding an immense layer of irony to this entire mess. It seemed to have really kicked off when he had a plushie run of the Wendigo creature get fully funded, with some people pointing out in the comments on a video how it's wrong of him to use the Wendigo for profit due to cultural appropriation. Wendigoon would reply to him stating in his opinion that it's a way for people to alienate themselves from one another, and that the gatekeeping of it leads to a majority of negative conclusions rather than positive. He would then state how he was born in Appalachia and was told these stories throughout his whole life, ending things off stating it's just a small part of American culture as he means no harm to anything at all. Wendigoon has even gone on to state that the times he was told not to mention a creature by name by natives wasn't due to cultural appropriation, but because saying its name is a bad omen, showing that even those who know about this don't think he's taking their culture for his own gain or profit or whatever. Some people on Twitter weren't having this though, as they said he wasn't helping native people at all but was disrespecting them somehow. And even when informed he was partially Cherokee, they would still double down on it because what he said was apparently disrespectful somehow in some way, shape, or form. They would end things off saying that since Wendigo is Cherokee, it's somehow bad because the Wendigo isn't a Cherokee folklore creature, basically showing just how brain rot they've become from using Twitter for so many years on the internet. Wendigoon selling a Wendigo plushie isn't cultural appropriation, it's just dumbasses online trying to start shit because they want to feel morally superior to someone who's popular and richer than they'll ever be in life. When I mean no normal person gave a shit about this, I truly mean it. And so far, everything pinned against the man was just people reaching for straws to try and take down someone they don't like for whatever extremely petty reason they may have had. However, the next thing people would bring up would become the most famous, as it seemed that Wendigoon had a bit more going on behind the scenes in his life than it seemed at first. Now before he got famous, Wendigoon used to go by the name Boogaloo Boy right when he started YouTube around mid-2020. He's also heavily into guns and more specifically, gun YouTube channels who post content relating to guns and such. This will lead to his very first upload on the channel being the GunTuber tier list on September 5th, 2020, in which he ranks his favorite gun tubers and name drops himself under his original online handle.
And you may be asking, well, Boogaloo Boy, what makes you qualified to rank all of these YouTubers who are bigger than you? And to that I say, you're absolutely right.
Now the term Boogaloo in today's landscape has heavy ties to the alt-right anti-extremist movement seen in the United States, with the mid-2020s being when they really started to hit the mainstream due to multiple crimes committed in their name while wearing bright and colorful Hawaiian shirts. Once Wendigoon started to get his channel up and running, some people start to question why he went by such a name to begin with and why he still wears Hawaiian t-shirts despite the heavy implications of him being tied to the alt-right, with one person making a post about it on his Reddit page in March 2021. Wendigoon would respond to this as things had been growing for a bit by this point, saying how he started using the term after it was a code word used by Che Guevara and that he loves freedom and liberty so it made sense to him. He would go on to state that he made a meme page called Boogaloo Boy at one point in time, even stating he was the original person who got the movement into the Hawaiian t-shirt craze. However, he learned of all the bad actors both on the far left and far right trying to take over the movement and turn it into what it is today, in which he dropped his association quickly into his online career after seeing how bad things have gotten in there, acknowledging he was a part of it but not any longer. Now this response is something that I'm sure plenty of y'all can relate to, myself included, as while my situation had nothing to do with politics thankfully, it was an old friend group where I realized that things are getting worse and worse for me and I had to get myself out of there and stop associating with them, so I did. While Wendigoon acknowledges he was a part of it at one point in time, the fact he got himself out of that mess before it got really bad shows he was able to see things were getting very, very concerning, and so he moved on in a positive direction, with the majority of people understanding this as a good move and growth of character on his side of things. However, there are people who were absolutely appalled he was a part of what is now widely known as an alt-right movement despite him leaving just as things started to get bad, and so a lot of them would start to dig for anything they can use on the man in an attempt to slander his name. This would culminate in a Twitter post on December 5th, 2023, where the user mentioned how Wendigoon used to follow Kyle Rittenhouse on the site while also calling him a neo-Nazi. For those that don't know, Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 people in self-defense during the Kenosha riots back in August 2020 after they attacked him. He would eventually and rightfully be declared innocent in court, with people on the left still trying to say he didn't act in self-defense when he clearly did. This would hold true as people would see he indeed was following Kyle on the website, with them even finding an old post of him celebrating he was officially declared a free man over a year since the initial self-defense shooting. They would even see he was following the Parler Twitter page, a social media app that is mostly used by conservative and right-leaning people in general. Wendigoon would eventually respond to all this with a tweet stating he's not right-wing or bigoted or anything extreme in that nature and just a dude who likes to make YouTube videos on the website, also telling his fans to not harass or insult anyone as no one should be attacked over the situation to begin with. Some Twitter users will start to shift the goalposts and go after him for being a devout Christian as they hate his religion for some reason, even trying to say his pastime as a Sunday school teacher makes him abnormal despite this being a very common practice in the United States. Some would even talk about how he still loves guns in the modern day, as for some reason there are people on the internet who think that someone owning guns makes them a downright evil person for whatever reasons going on in their head. As you can see, none of this is even slightly controversial to the majority of people, only to those in the left-leaning political sphere, something that Twitter is very well known for. The thing is, Wendigoon has stayed out of politics throughout his career for whatever reasons he may have, only talking about it when people start to go at him to remind everyone he's not some crazy bigoted right-winger but just a dude who makes content and is probably at the very least a little leaning on the bit of the conservative side. Nobody needs to know about his politics as it's his business when to talk about it as he's not a political content creator, but a lot of his detractors have this feeling like he needs to talk about his beliefs in what I can only describe as a strange mix of parasocial and terminally online behavior. Now this will subside as none of this is controversial and just people grasping for straws to try and villainize the man, and so most would move on with their lives in the process. Sure, you still had your internet randos trying to paint him to be a bad guy, but no one whose opinion mattered would say anything about it because everyone knew at the end of the day he's just a dude who makes videos on spooky stories and conspiracy theories while being a bit right-leaning. However, there was one YouTuber in particular who had something he wanted to say about the man, a YouTuber who would go on to produce one of the most insane videos I have ever watched on the website in my entire life. On May 25th, 2024, YouTuber In Praise of Shadows would release his video Bad Conservative Movies, in which he goes on for 3 hours ranting about conservatives as he's a clearly liberal man. He talks about Kevin Spacey being a gross human being and how his audience had a harsh reaction to an old video of his, with it mainly coming off as a rant about his feelings and other stuff that's not very important. He even starts talking about his financial issues, which while I understand given I ain't in a hot spot myself right now, you should totally subscribe to my Patreon by the way, complaining about personal financial issues in a video that's supposed to be talking about conservative movies really ain't the brightest move to make, and as I kept watching I could tell this dude did not think it out when recording and editing this video. However, things get bad when he starts to talk about Wendigoon, as he has a whole section dedicated to him and why he thinks he's a bad person. The way he goes about this section is super interesting as it heavily relies on his mindset that because he's a liberal, he's a better moral person than Wendigoon, on top of other things like this extremely stupid example he gives I'm about to play.
I have no need or desire to hear 5 hours of opinions on Blood Meridian from a 21-year-old millionaire who got famous around the age of 19. And I know that is probably the most boomer thing that I have ever said. Apologies for that. But I say that to argue that I really do think that there are some works that are really not intended to hit the right way until we're older. There are some works that fundamentally will not be understood by you if you are wealthy and have always been upper class your entire life. And this may all sound condescending, but that doesn't stop it from being somewhat true. I don't mean that to think that you shouldn't be able to say or publish whatever you like at any point in your life. you're obviously free to do so. And I also don't want it to be seen as if I'm talking down to young people, because I'm not. Politically, they are frequently the most with it, and their voices should be heard on issues that pertain to them. They are looked down upon too often in our culture. What I'm talking about here pertains to the very act of writing itself. And with that, perspective. And I don't know if you can actually really truly be a good cultural critic with a voice that has a definitive perspective, without several years of genuine, independent, lived experience away from the home that you were raised in. And in his case, he became exceptionally wealthy by the time that he was 19 or 20. And so if you leave the home and immediately become famous and rich, without having to ever actually truly struggle, can you be considered to have ever actually had lived experience at all that would qualify you to give criticism on works of art about the experience of average and poor people? I would argue not. And if that is the case, why would your perspective matter as a critic? Not to mention the fact that Wendigoon was raised in a very wealthy family, and with that comes from a wealthy perspective. He himself has inadvertently admitted that his family at one point had millions of dollars, when he said once on stream, "Would you believe me that when my dad was young, he used to be in an organized crime gang and is now a Sunday school teacher? Very wild life that guy's lived. He was in an organized crime gang that my grandfather ran. A lot of bad things went down. They got investigated by the FBI. My grandpa went to jail. My dad had to testify and tried to take up the business. The business fell apart, and he ended up losing millions of dollars to the state. Lost everything, found God, became a Christian, and is now both the best man and the best Christian I've ever met."
As you can tell, the entire argument he set up relies on the assumption that Wendigoon was rich before he got rich on YouTube, and that says that because he assumably never financially struggled in life, he'll never be able to understand deeper intellectual thought, in this case of reviewing Blood Meridian. Despite nobody giving a shit about this argument to begin with except for people who think they're smarter than others, even the example of how his father was working for a mob before he lost it all falls flat, as not only does he show no evidence to this claim at all and it's just text on screen, despite quoting it directly from wherever he saw it, he somehow didn't see that Wendigoon said this is before he was born. His dad was rich at one point in time before going broke, and Wendigoon was born after he lost all the money, meaning he was never rich to begin with. So even his assumption that Wendigoon was rich before he started YouTube falls apart in the very quote he bases his extremely stupid tunnel vision argument that he brings up, and this isn't even close to how much stupider the guy gets. Aim Praises Shadows starts to go on about how Wendigoon is apparently a far-right bigot because he followed Kyle Rittenhouse and starts to talk about how he was part of the Boogaloo Boys before dipping out when shit got crazy. Instead of understanding that someone taking themselves out of a bad part of the internet because they realize that it was bad is a good thing and shows good character growth, he instead frames it as if Wendigoon is forever a far-right evil person and even implies he's part of the violence they partook in.
He was just like, "Oh geez, sorry guys, about starting a violent hate group guys. Sorry that people got killed. I totally didn't mean to do all that. My bad. I'll do better next time." Also, it should be noted that the Boogaloo Boys are known for wearing Hawaiian shirts. And guess who else always has on a Hawaiian shirt, despite the fact that he publicly totally does not share in their beliefs, guys.
I have never seen someone say something so stupid with so much confidence like this in a pretty long time on YouTube. If Wendigoon was still part of the Boogaloo Boys, that would be an issue. Except he's not part of them and hasn't been part of them for 3.5 years now because, as I've been saying, he took himself out of that after realizing it was all screwed up. Well, there are always things out there like pedophilia that aren't forgivable, for example. Someone learning to better themselves and getting out of a bad part of the internet is forgivable. But if people like Aim Praises Shadows, once you do something bad, you are forever that person for the rest of your life. Using his own logic, I can frame him as a stupid wannabe intellectual for the rest of his life, even though I'm willing to bet he'll learn from this. Oh, but because Wendigoon learned to better himself but he doesn't agree with his political opinions, he's a bad person. Give me a fucking break, dude. It only gets worse though, as Aim Praises Shadows will start to talk about a bucket load of other very big YouTubers and influencers that he thinks are problematic that Wendigoon associates with these few I'm about to show you being the most important in my opinion.
He has collaborated with Nick Crowley, who constantly makes money through the most morbid and shameful true crime content, of showcasing the last minutes of people before they are suddenly and unexpectedly killed. Crowley is similar to Wendigoon, in that on the surface they seem fairly edgy, but clean enough. But then you notice that he follows less than 200 people on Twitter, and among them are the same circle with names like Wendigoon, Plagued Moth, Turkey Tom, Mr. Ballin, and DonutOperator. He is friends with Brandon Buckingham, a gun YouTuber who has been accused of threatening. He is friends with Mutahar, who argued against Andrew Tate being deplatformed from social media websites, and has recently showcased a great deal of transphobia in his most recent video. Wendigoon is publicly friends with DonutOperator, and even retweeted a photograph of the two of them hugging. DonutOperator is a gun-crazed, very far-right YouTuber with 4 million subscribers, whose career consists of him reviewing footage of police officers shooting and killing people. He was once a cop himself, before he made more money making YouTube videos and retired. His content is very pro-state, pro-cop, pro-gun, and pro-death to people who don't share his beliefs propaganda. For example, one of his videos is titled, "Predator Takes Shotgun to the Face," and features a picture of him smiling in the corner of the thumbnail next to an image of a terrified man about to be executed by cops, with the text that reads, "Head removal."
Hi everyone, Donut here. We got a couple of shootings for you today. The main shooting just warms my heart.
And you know, for someone who supposedly is so very anti-government, Wendigoon seems very comfortable with a man who makes his living worshipping violence committed by the state. He's a man of no conviction, claiming to be very against the government and for the rights of the people, while at the same time giving a warm embrace to one of the biggest fascist bootlickers on the internet. And the only thing that one could reasonably gather from this picture of them hugging is that he too is a fascist bootlicker himself.
Now he would go on and name around 15 total YouTubers he had issues with, but you might have noticed something about all this. He's complaining about the other people and his issues with them, yet Wendigoon isn't these people. He's Wendigoon. He's not Brandon Buckingham or Mudahar. He is his own person who hasn't done the things he thinks is bad. He's just using guilt by association to try and take down his career. If In Praise of Shadows has issues with those other people, you would think he would make videos talking about them in specific, but he instead tries to drag Wendigoon into this because he knows he doesn't have anything of substance to say about him. He just thinks he's morally superior to him because of his political beliefs. It's even worse, as it turns out he was completely wrong about Brandon Buckingham being a rapist. That was a lie spread by Sneeko, someone who I am 100% certain that In Praise of Shadows would hate way more than Wendigoon, showing that he can't even do basic research on this very serious stuff that he's claiming about the man. Also, Mudahar isn't transphobic, and DonutOperator laughing at a predator getting his head blown off will always be funny. If I had a nickel for every bread tuber that defended a predator this year, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. There's some more guilt by association, and he talks about that cultural appropriation bullshit we've gone over already, and then goes on to imply that white people in Appalachia are racist simply because they're from that part of the world.
According to the latest census, there are only 23 black people who live in Maggie Valley. There are 15 Native Americans despite it touching the reservation. Most of this area used to be sundown towns. It is about as white as you could possibly get. Deep Appalachia is very white country, and for the most part, is exceptionally racist. Genuinely in this part of the country, you have to assume that any white person you meet is racist unless they show you otherwise.
I don't need to go deep into this, he's just showing how he lumps groups of people together without knowing who they actually are because of his personal bias, and funnily enough, one can argue he might even be racist himself for saying such a thing. In Praise of Shadows would finally show people why he dislikes Wendigoon, and that's because his fans started to go after him after he was critical about him during that whole Kyle Rittenhouse Twitter situation.
You can't get mad if people call you on questionable things that are said or done if you are making money off of them. And what resulted from some good faith criticism of his use of language was days upon days of people calling me a fag, amongst other things, but that was their go-to word. And to be honest, if you're a public figure who is being criticized publicly, and the only people who come to your defense are Nazis, then that can only be read as 2 ways. Either that you're sympathetic to their views, or that you're perfectly fine making money from them, and are comfortable with that ideology being the backbone of your base.
That's right, despite everyone seeing how Wendigoon told his fanbase to not harass anyone during all this, we know how the internet likes to work, especially Twitter, and so it's not surprising some people didn't listen and went after In Praise of Shadows. There's a reason I and many other YouTubers put disclaimers at the beginning of our videos or in the description. It's because it shows that we don't condone harassing other people online because that's stupid as shit. However, anyone with the brain knows that there will be people who won't listen, and at that point there's nothing I or other people can do, as we already said not to harass the person in question. If he's still butthurt about people making fun of him despite Wendigoon telling his fans to not harass anybody, that's on him for being a sensitive pussy and not because Wendigoon built up a Nazi fanbase like he tries to imply.
Right in the midst of this going on, a very funny thing happened, and that Wendigoon followed me on Twitter. I was not following him at the time. He never publicly told people to stop calling me a fag. He never once reached out to me privately, but he did follow me, which means in my eyes that he 100% knew what was happening because I did tweet about it several times, and then followed me to let me know that he knew, and that he was watching and that he intended to do nothing to stop it. Why else would he follow me in that exact moment? He has never interacted with a single one of my posts, not one like, not one comment. We are not friends. But he does follow me. He follows next to nobody on Twitter. What other motivation could he have had there to follow me in that specific moment? other than to be a method of quiet and deniable intimidation? What other way could that have been read from my perspective? If you think it was entirely coincidental, which he may argue it was, then I've got a sack of magic beans I'd like to sell to you. That was the moment that pushed me over the edge to make this video.
Yeah, I don't really got much else to say. The amount of insane tunnel visioning it takes to get to this conclusion that Wendigoon is intimidating him by following him on fucking Twitter is insane. He just assumes Wendigoon knew he was being harassed by what he assumes is his fanbase and thinks that following him on Twitter is some sort of power move, when it's extremely more likely he just did so because he saw some of his videos and he liked them.
We could talk about another time, where someone made a YouTuber gay sex alignment chart and put Wendigoon as a sub-bottom, to which he responded to them and said, "What did I do to hurt you?" Which, clearly is a joke, but also the worst kinds of straight guys when they make jokes related to queerness, almost exclusively direct the punchline at femme gays and bottoms, because they view them as lesser than masculine tops.
This is peak Twitter brain right here. Nobody in the real world gives a shit about this. This dude needs to get off the internet and touch some grass before he collapses in his own mind of idiocracy. The last part of the video is insane, as he would go on to say that being conservative is bad and that Wendigoon shouldn't be allowed in the public anymore.
With takes like, "Oh, he's just a YouTuber. Why does it matter?" Or, "So what if he's a conservative? Is that a problem?" Which the answer to that is yes. But the reason that I care is because this does not belong in horror, or anywhere. I care deeply about horror, and everything that he does has demonstrated so far in his career that he should not be welcomed in our spaces, or even, just in public in general.
This, my friends, is an example of what happens when you think you're politically superior to another to the point anyone outside your worldview is evil, but in actuality, you're a complete dumbass who has shown the most insane levels of tunnel visioning I've ever witnessed from a YouTuber with a sizable audience. This is a certified pseudo-intellectual brain rot moment, and this guy has probably killed his entire career, as not only did he go after Wendigoon, he went after a whole bunch of other very influential people online. Wendigoon would reply saying how he's confused that he hates him so much, and while I'd normally break it down a little bit like usual, leaving it on screen as it slowly zooms in while you read the words and maybe even pause to do so should suffice in this case given the circumstances. Now, most of those other YouTubers mentioned would respond to this guy basically calling him insane, and In Praise of Shadows would eventually private the video altogether as he realized just how badly he screwed up. There's some Discord leaks going on that show just how stupid In Praise of Shadows is. Like with this post about how he believes Wendigoon could have done more, like make a Twitter post about this. Mind you, Wendigoon already made that YouTube comment replying to him and telling his fans to not harass him, but this guy has such a massive victim complex he comes off like a complete sensitive pussy. There's even another post where Wendigoon responded to his video in just a few hours after it went live that he must not truly understand the situation because there wasn't enough time to reflect on it in his opinion. I have never seen someone so wrapped up in this way of thinking in my life until today, because he's showing that he's slyly asking for a direct apology of some sort when he doesn't deserve one after trying to ruin his career with this failed hit piece. Wendigoon's response was fine. This guy's just trying to jump through any hoops he can in order to somehow make himself out to be a victim at Wendigoon's hand when he isn't, and it's absolutely pathetic to see. There's only one thing in the video that raised any questions, and that was when he said the word Boogaloo isn't connected to Che Guevara unlike how Wendigoon said years back. I looked it up myself, and the only thing connecting the word to anything Cuban related at all would be the Latin Boogaloo music genre that was popular in the 60s and in places like Cuba. While some like to say this means Wendigoon was lying and shouldn't be trusted, it's also within reason this was something he might have been told by members of the Boogaloo Boys when he asked where the word came from and he believed them, and to be honest, I don't care to look into such a mundane point as it doesn't matter anymore since he left those people over 3.5 years ago now. He even said himself how he wasn't rich before YouTube despite what the guy assumed and that he feels bad as he can tell he's a hateful person, showing that he even feels sorry for the dude after he tried to ruin his career. Wendigoon isn't a far-right racist bigot or whatever. He's a dude who, as we can tell, has some right-leaning beliefs that he keeps to himself. At that, he isn't even a political content creator. So this entire mess is just some dude who doesn't like conservatives trying to skew and manipulate anything he can in order to paint a specific one he doesn't like in the worst light possible. I don't give a shit about someone's political beliefs, be left, right, whatever, but when it gets to the point someone is slandering another because he believes his belief is superior to theirs, it shows me how toxic of a person they are. I hope that In Praise of Shadows can come to understand just how bad his current mindset about politics is and the way he goes about enforcing his views is wrong. Because assuming all conservatives are bad, just like how some people assume all liberals are bad, is a very backwards and stupid way of thinking. I'm sure he'll weather through all this and make it out okay, but until then all people can do is wait and see if he learns from this situation to grow into a better person just like how Wendigoon did, or if he'll double down on the skewed political mindset he has that he's shown to the world.